right, welcome back, everyone. If you are tuning in, make sure you subscribe below. On today's Diva Docket, we are talking about mental health. It is not May. I know that's Mental Health Awareness Month, but it's just important, especially in these times, to stay attuned to your wellness and taking care of yourself, whatever that may look like. And so we just kind of wanted to check in today and kind of talk about our own journeys, what led us to therapy, things that we learned along the way, maybe even things we're still working on. Just because although there is less stigma, and I'm happy to see that, especially in the various algorithms and all the things on the socials. I think there can still be for some shame or some hesitance in going. And so yeah, just wanted to tap in and kind of discuss that. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just starting with like the stigma piece of it, I still, and I obviously, like in comparison, the Caucasian community
Mm-hmm.
and the African American community, the stigma is definitely in our communities,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Because they're going to therapy as children,
Yeah.
like um, and I think that, like you said, that there hasn't been a shift where we start to look at it as the tool that it is
Mm-hmm.
versus, especially down south, like you're going to therapy, you're putting your belief in man, God can fix all things. And, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, well, God created that therapist.
That's the part.
So,
Yeah.
the stigma is definitely being removed. I'm even seeing in like the older generation, not necessarily that they're going,
Yeah.
but that they're understanding the next generation going and like do what you have to do for your mental health, and kind of seeing some of the positives. So, yeah, it is good. It's definitely good to see those stigmas being removed. It's even in the African American male communities having so
Mm-hmm.
many male therapists enter into that avenue is just really been really really nice.
Yeah. And something you said made me think about just the fact that a lot of times people will go to therapy or think that something has to be wrong
Hmm.
to go to therapy. But I know you were saying, or just in some of our discussions, like, you and your husband attended therapy and there wasn't necessarily an issue. So
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know if you want to share more about that or how that's.
Yeah, so he was open again, that was one of the bigger things is that he was open to going to therapy and had a therapist himself before he
Mm-hmm.
ever met me. So it wasn't like some foreign concept to him or like you said having to think that something is wrong. Like he understood the concept of tool, like you get pull tools out of it. Um so we started going to therapy very early into our relationship. Um and it wasn't at the time, it wasn't anything wrong. It was
Mm-hmm.
just like so we can learn to better communicate because you come into a relationship and you bring the things that you had before, the triggers
Yeah.
that you had before. So even though there wasn't necessarily anything wrong in our
Mm-hmm.
relationship, there was still that communication thing of being like, okay, when this person talked to me like this, it meant this, and now I'm reacting as
Yeah.
if when you do it, it has to mean the same thing. It's like, okay, on both ends,
Mm-hmm.
our thought processes are around money. You just have these triggers from your past. So it was just like, how do we work around that? How do we build healthy communication so we can realize what probably where we contributed in our past as
Mm-hmm.
well. Um, and so it was more so that we just wanted the tools to help when the trials do come because they will come naturally in any relationship, your work relationship, your family, like the
Yeah.
things are going to come. So it just helped us prepare.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, from an individual standpoint, what maybe led you to therapy, or what was some of the things that maybe came up in that process?
Um, for me, there were two main things. One, I was going through family sickness.
Mm-hmm.
My mom had just kind of recovered from her cancer journey, or recovering from her cancer journey, being in remission, but just going through that. And at the same time as she was coming out, my daddy was going into his dementia journey. So it was just like battling that, being away from both of them because they live, a few hours away from me. So not knowing I couldn't like be right there. So as my mom is recovering from being sick, she's also now becoming a caretaker and
Mm-hmm.
having to, deal with that stress because we are a very close family. Like I can't be there and not knowing what's happening. So it was just a
Yeah.
lot mentally for me. And then also I knew that growing up, like I've had a lot of beautiful views about marriage, and I knew I always wanted to be a wife.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I didn't want to marry the wrong person. So I wanted the marriage. And I wanted to see what I was doing to contribute to the type of people that I was picking. Like, what was it
Mm-hmm.
in me that might pick some of the same traits? Because in every relationship that you ever have, you're the common denominator.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to see for me, um, a lot of my teachings and upbringings, which is what I was learning in therapy, um, how they made me present as a woman in a relationship. And for me, it was really important to have a male tell me that
Mm-hmm.
and see it from a male's perspective because it was kind of hard for me in relationships to hear that from a male's perspective when it's not coming out of a healthy way. So just that was like two of the main reasons I wanted to personally grow and develop and become the person that I wanted to be in a positive way when I became a wife because I always knew I was going to be a wife. It was just something I spoke in, just like I always knew I was going to be a lawyer and I'm going to do the things that it takes to get to that journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I wanted to have to come into that place and be healthy. And then, like I said, in from because the sickness was happening at a younger age for me. I mean, I was in my maybe early 30s. I didn't have a lot of friends around that had parents that were sick.
Yeah.
So it was a very lonely place. So, that's kind of what helped me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think mine was slightly different in terms of what led me. I started therapy, I want to say probably shortly, but for somewhere around 30, somewhere in that space. And I think for me, what was happening is, um, I think I try not to overuse like anxiety and labels and the things, but I think that I was probably experiencing some level of anxiety, but I couldn't quite pinpoint the reason or what it was coming from. And I think that for me, it kind of felt, if you want to call it quarter life crisis, it kind of felt like on one end, I had done all the things
Mm-hmm.
or the things I thought I was supposed to do in terms of academics. And so for me, a lot of things come from feeling like I guess the wound that it tapped into once I got into therapy was like proving myself
Mm-hmm.
and being enough. And so how I proved myself, I was more so a natural student. And so I performed well in school. Things kind of came pretty quickly to me. And so I felt like, okay, well, I've done high school, I've done college, I've done law school, I've taken two bar. So at this point, what else is there for me? Ain't for so many degrees that I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
get. So it felt like I don't know how else to prove myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also there was some aspect too of coming into home ownership and my life didn't necessarily look like I thought it would look. And I think it's a trap that more so some women can fall into more so than men. I don't really know. I don't hear men really talk about it necessarily. But I think we're socialized that, oh, you grow up, you maybe go to school, you get a man, you have kids. Like there's this thing that we're socialized to do, whereas men don't really.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're taught that,
Mm-hmm.
or they're not
Don't
necessarily. There's
have the
not
same
that
pressure.
pressure.
That
Yeah,
same pressure.
and so I think for me, it was like, I had a home, I had a good job, and I thought at a certain point, like, oh, I would have a partner and have kids by now. And that really wasn't occurring. Now, honestly, in hindsight, like, yeah, good, because it's like the things you got to do, the things I got to do and experience. Like, you didn't need to have two, three kids. They're definitely not at that point in your life. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
cool. But, like, I was kind of experiencing those two things at the same time and just like struggling with that. And so I initially like the bar, and I think certain companies also have nowadays where you could get sessions or a certain amount of sessions for free. Most people
Mm.
call it like EAP.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so the county bar actually had like a free lawyer's assistant. So I just
Pals.
went in
Mhm.
there just to like talk and figure out like I'm just not happy right now and I
Okay.
can't figure it out. And so I actually, I don't know if it was like a CLE I attended that I saw my now therapist, but I knew like I want a black woman because I want to be able to not have to explain certain things and that kind of thing. And so
Relatability.
yes, and
Mhm.
so I, like I said, started with her several years ago, and it's been an on and off because at certain points it's like, okay, you're good, you don't really need, if you ever need me, I'm here, but like
Mhm.
you don't need to keep coming every month kind of thing. And
Mhm.
so yeah, I think for me that was the first aspect of really tapping into that concept of like being enough and feeling like you have to earn love or prove yourself to be lovable. I think
Mhm.
that was the main kind of individual thing that I initially worked through.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
in your journey, like as you're working through like personal growth, like what are some of the, I guess do you feel like as long as you have been in therapy, like I said, on and off, even I was in personal therapy for a while. My therapist passed away, and I just hadn't been able to kind of bring myself back to,
Mm-hmm.
finding another therapist. So right now it's been off on a personal journey,
Yeah.
for maybe about 2 years, but I've been in couples therapy. So when you're in those, like, do you feel like you ever, and I know this is, every therapist is gonna cringe, or do you ever feel like you're healed? Or do you
Mm.
feel like you just get tools to kind of deal with certain issues? Do they still repeat themselves?
So, and I'm gonna be honest, again, they might be shaking their head like, girl, you got it wrong. I am not a mental health professional, so I'm just speaking for myself here. I don't know that be, I think that it is a continuous journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that you can heal certain aspects of things as they come up, but I think we're a continuous project, if that makes sense. Um, and so I think that, so taking like the enoughness aspect,
Mm-hmm.
I think that while I now have the tools to like, I recognize when it comes up, or I even recognize when people project that on me of like, I don't have to prove myself. Like, you know what I mean? I pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean, because I remember having a moment in therapy where I talked about, I can't even remember what happened, but I was so upset that it upset me. Like, I didn't react in a big way. But then when I was talking to her, I was like, I just feel like this shouldn't
I should
bother
be
me.
past
Like
this.
I should be, and it's like the goal is not that it won't bother you or it
Mm-hmm.
won't make you sad or you won't feel anything. The goal is that you won't, as a kid say, crash out because this happened. You know what I mean? Your reaction to the thing is
Mm-hmm.
healthier, is, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how I think of it. I think that you kind of heal certain things, but I think because we're living a continuous journey, you know what I mean, as things comes up, unfortunately there's new traumas or there's new things that
Yeah.
happen in life that now there's this, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's this new thing I
Mm-hmm.
have to
Mm-hmm.
process and I have to
Yeah.
get through. um so I think there's that, like there's definitely still moments where, and when you bring a partner into it, one of the things that, I mean, honestly, I hate it because it's not fun, but when you have a partner, to some extent, you're a mirror for each other, so your partner's going to show you things that like your ish stinks, and
Mm-hmm.
it just is what it is. And then you also are like a mirror for them, and
Mm-hmm.
you both came in with your stuff, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean. And I think for me, that process, as well as just the aspect of, again, being a student, I always hated group projects because I felt like there's always that person who doesn't do their job, that doesn't show up like that, and then you affected our grade. So let's, you know what I mean, let's
Right.
be
I
real.
could have got
I'm
an
gonna make
A.
sure I'm gonna do the part because we're gonna get this A. But then it's like you getting credit and you didn't do the work. And so the thing that I had to learn, because again, that enoughness wound is within a partnership. You cannot, you should not, you can, but it's not.
It's not
Yeah,
healthy.
you should not overextend or overfunction. And so, yeah, in that group project for that A, I definitely overfunction because I want the A. But
Mm,
in a partnership, I can only do my part.
mm-hmm.
And they may or may not do their part. And then you have to work through, I mean, probably, hopefully in therapy, what does this look like if they're not doing their part? Can I stay in this? Can I not? What adjustments, boundaries, people love boundaries, do I
Mm-hmm.
have if this is what it is? And so I think that's the biggest thing and challenge, whether you're married or not. If you are in relationship with people, you can only do your part
Mm.
in that relationship. And I think that's the thing that can be tough.
And I think that is also something you learn in therapy.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
because you do try to overcompensate a lot. And I think one of the feelings that you get from that is feeling like you're constantly drained.
Mm.
Um, I think in a situation where both people are doing their parts, you might have moments of um, like just these deep sighs and feeling like overwhelmed in that moment, but it shouldn't feel. I don't know how to say. Like you shouldn't constantly feel like your battery is being drained because you're trying to overcompensate in situations. Um, but again, I do think that that's something you work through in therapy because, like you said, for um, so much of your life, even I just think about how we train kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a child, is share all your stuff. Like you can't have your toys. If anybody's over here, no matter if you know them or not, if they're a stranger or not, if they're in your place, you share, you
Mm-hmm.
give.
Yeah.
But then you kind of realize, like, as an adult, no, I don't have to share. I certainly don't have to share with strangers, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any kind of connection with. But it's like these years of being taught something. And
Mm-hmm.
then, therapy kind of like it brings some of those layers off and be like, yes, I know that this is what you're taught, but you can change some things in your adult. You don't have to,
Mm-hmm.
wear all the things that you're taught as a child. But I do think couples therapy is really helpful when two people are going in it to try to work on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because, like you said, you're already a mirror in a relationship, but therapy really shows you
Mm-hmm.
some things about yourself, and then it just is like, oh, okay, it's not always this other person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then you
Yeah.
have to hear it in therapy together. And sometimes you want to be like, I told you, I knew it.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do that because
Yeah.
that just kind of shuts another person down. But um, I also think it's important to find a, a couples therapist, and this is just my opinion, to go to a couples therapy that has a neutral ground.
Mm.
Sometimes people are in their personal journeys with their own therapist,
Mm-hmm.
and I think because that therapist kind of has known you as a person, it might be hard if you're trying to start a journey with in couples therapy to
Mm-hmm.
go to someone that person is familiar with.
Mm.
Um, so I do think it's like you should find someone that y'all both um, like, because I think it allows for a lot more vulnerability when a person's not going in like, well, this, they already got preconceived notions about me.
Yeah.
Of course they're going to favor your side. Like, you don't want to have to deal with those battles
Yeah.
going into couples therapy. I know our therapist, my husband's Caribbean, and we were able to find you know, we didn't find, like, we didn't look up Caribbean
Yeah.
therapists, but the person that we found happened to be a black male that was Caribbean.
Yeah.
So there was some instant connectivity, and even in moments that they're talking, and I'm like, all right, like, I'm just
Right.
listening. It's like, you hear a lot about their history and how they grow up and all these things, but there's a relatability there for my husband that it's like, okay, he
Mm-hmm.
understands in ways that I obviously cannot, because I
Yeah.
didn't grow up in a Caribbean household. So I think that that's important too.
Yeah. And I don't know because of course therapists have their own like ethics and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's typically allowed or how that works. I know it's my understanding or what I've seen, just my experience is, you have your individual if you go, and then you might
Mhm.
have, so there might be three people involved. I do think what I have done is at times is like if our couples therapist has provided us with a tool, I might share it in my individual for
Mhm.
perspective. But yeah, I haven't done the experience where it's just like we all going to this person and we separate. I
Yeah.
haven't, so I don't
Yeah.
know. Um, but I do think, to your point, I think there just has to be that comfort, and what that looks like. It might be like, to your point, I want someone who looks like me.
Mhm.
um and I think, because they have so many apps, the better helps, the all the things, you can find someone who you feel maybe will get you,
Mhm.
or your perspective. um I think the other thing that I will say is therapy is only working to the
Mhm.
extent that you are honest.
Mhm.
So, and that's why I think, part of the reason why, like, your therapist can't be your friend.
Mhm.
And even if you want to take it from a faith base, like, your pastor is not your friend, because at certain points, your therapist, your pastor, if you, go from a spiritual standpoint, there has to be that layer there, or that boundary there, so that when you need, I don't want to say correction, but I don't have a better word for it, but when you need some reframing or some redirection, there's that boundary there to be able to take that
Mhm.
and even respect it, um and receive it. I don't want to say like they're the authority figure necessarily, but you know what I mean. Like, I think sometimes with your friend it's more like, well, we'll say all of this, and then, you see those memes and it'll be like, but, you know that's just me, do what you want, you know what I mean. Like, people don't want to be responsible
Yeah.
for telling you
Yeah.
what to do,
Yeah.
but it's like there has to be that boundary, whether it's like, a spiritual advisor or just, therapist, so that they can help you. That's the whole point. And so
Mhm.
if you're going in there and you're not telling your full truth, or you're not telling the ugly, and you're not going below surface
Mhm.
level, then your growth is going to reflect that. And it's like, you could keep paying that copay, but if you're not really getting real about, hey, this is what I'm struggling with,
Mhm.
and this is kind of how it was for me growing up, because I do think people hate to hear it, most of our, like, patterns come from either some past, maybe not necessarily your childhood, but some past thing that happened,
Mhm.
that you, to your point, you were like, well, I took this to mean blah blah
Mhm.
blah, or something that was child related, you know
Mhm.
what I mean, happened when you were really young, and you kind of internalized that, and that became, your way of seeing the world.
Mhm.
So I think it doesn't feel good all the time to go deep, but if you're not willing to go deep, then
Mhm.
it's not really gonna be as beneficial as it could.
Yeah, I think that's it. It is very true, and it's literally the point of therapy. But I do think it can be hard. Not as hard in your personal, private journeys, but I do think it could be harder in couples therapy, because it can be hard if you're willing to lie to yourself in your personal journey. You might not be willing to go deep there either. But to me, that there's a little bit more privacy and seclusion to do so.
Mm.
Where if you're in couples therapy and that becomes that person hearing these vulnerabilities, which is the whole point. I
Mm-hmm.
understand. But in your mind, it could be like, when I turn the camera off, that therapist is gone, but this person has done heard all my deepness, and now we got to, handle the uncomfortable conversations. But that is the point. Like, that is the very point um, of therapy, and it is like one of the things that I heard out of therapy and continue to carry with me is like, get comfortable in the uncomfortable. Like, you have to get comfortable in those uncomfortable conversations if you're going to grow, if you're going to learn to be transparent, if you're going to build trust. Um, you just have to, like, be uncomfortable. And I think therapy gives you the tools and how to be comfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it teaches you how to talk
Yeah.
to someone and allow them to be able to feel vulnerable. It teaches you that yes, you can say things to hurt someone, and if they decide to want to talk about it 2 or 3 days later, therapy teaches you that does not mean you're throwing it up in my face. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is not what that is.
Yeah.
Where before, therapy, that's just a defensive mechanism. When you don't want to talk to somebody, you're throwing it up in
Mm-hmm.
my face. We talked about this. I apologize.
Yeah.
But that term is used so loosely, like you're throwing it up in my face just because our issue is still ongoing. It hasn't been resolved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I just think about like corporate. Like I don't think you would ever tell your manager who has told you first quarter and second quarter that this
Mm-hmm.
needs to be done and it's still an open issue. Why are you throwing that in my face?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it ain't fixed.
Right.
Let's fix it.
For sure.
So yeah, you just have to learn to be vulnerable and be uncomfortable instead of avoiding conversations.
Yeah. And I think what that brought up for me was even, people have attachment styles
Mhm.
and how and
Mhm.
that usually kind of shows how they tend to handle conflict
Mhm.
based on that. And so one of the things that I learned was, I have more of an anxious attachment style. And so in spoiler alert, you can get secure, it's fine. If you're anxious, if you're avoidant, it's fine. But so I
You
had
can
to,
change.
yeah, I had to learn, speaking of uncomfortable, like I'm fine if we need to table this conversation, but I need the communication that that's what we're doing.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Instead of just walking away or stonewall, like silent treatment, that kind of stuff. That doesn't work over here.
Mhm.
So for me, it's like, sure, we could come back to this because me being me, I want to resolve it.
Mhm.
But if you're not in that place or you're not ready or whatever, you need a minute, cool, but
Mhm.
communicate that.
Mhm.
So to your point, even getting and understanding that and getting to the point of like understanding what you need, you know what I
Mhm.
mean, and how to express that rather than, oh, this person stopped talking and now you have all these thoughts. So
Mhm.
like I do think that initially, honestly, to me, that's kind of how it's working. That if you feel uncomfortable, you're not going to leave every session and be like, that was great.
Oh God, no.
And like, no. And I actually have a rule. So my individual, I actually tend to like take a walk or do something or like move my body after because especially if it's like a heavier
Mm.
session. But from a couple standpoint, I don't talk about the session after.
Mhm.
Like I give it, you know what I mean, some days, and if we want
Mm.
to talk about it then, just because like I feel like people have you should process
You
what was
should,
said,
yeah.
and we don't have to keep going. Like we just spent an hour
Hour.
possibly
Yeah.
ping ponging, depending on how the conversation went. You know what I mean? We just spent an hour doing that. We don't. Let's
Yeah.
take in
Yeah.
what was said, and to your point, what I could be doing a little better, what you could be doing a little better, and let's wait till that's not as
Mhm.
maybe people don't feel as raw, I
Mhm.
would say. So that's kind of been my thing about it. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think if you are feeling a little uncomfortable or if you had that moment where therapy was like it was hard and I was emotional, like it's yeah, it's working.
If you had to say three of these like quote type things or three things that you come out of therapy with, like what would they be? Um, I'll give an example, and one of them actually came from your therapist, but I use it because I thought it was just
Mm-hmm.
so good. Was the story I'm telling myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that is essentially like you hear something, and they might say, can you cut off the edges off my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? Hopefully, you don't have an adult that's asking you that, but let's say that's the thing, right? And that's what the statement is. Which
Mm-hmm.
from that you hear they need me to serve them. They can't do their own thing. Like you start making up all these scenarios, and it's like, okay, the story I'm telling myself is. So I really like that one. Like I said, I love the be comfortable in uncomfortable conversations, and in that conversation, it did definitely come out about attachment styles, avoidant and stonewalling, and all like being able to put words to your actions. Like, oh, walking away actually means this, and this is why people do it. You're not the only one that does it.
Yeah.
Um, so that would be two for me. And then I think those will be my top two. I definitely do the for me I had to learn with my husband, like we have a lot of the same core values,
Mm-hmm.
but we talk so differently,
Mm.
very very differently. And I think once you get comfortable with somebody, you kind of start thinking you know their thoughts or you know what they're about to say.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to learn two things. One, don't tell me what I'm doing. Ask me why I'm doing it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and it was. I'll give you an simple example. Like the other day, he ate a piece of candy, and he was like, "Dang, I just ate that candy." And I was like, "It's not even that bad. The candy's not that bad." He said, "See, I wasn't gonna say that. It's just because I went to the dentist and it didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel good." You
Yeah.
know, it's like, why did you just ask me why? I said, you know, so that would be one of the things. Like, don't tell me what I'm doing. Ask me what I'm doing. And then that we practice and have to heavily practice using full sentences.
Mm.
Like we can't talk and have the other person try to fill something
Mm.
out.
Yeah.
Um, like I'll be like, go get a turkey sandwich, and he'll be like, so is it a turkey hamburger, a turkey sausage sandwich? And I'm just thinking, I order it all the time. I know it's a turkey sausage croissant,
Yeah.
but he needs to hear, can you please go order me a turkey
Yeah.
sausage croissant?
Some
Because that's not
details.
his thing.
Yeah.
So we have to heavily work on useful sentences. Don't expect that person to fill in your, and sometimes you don't even realize it, that it leaves that much room for interpretation because you do sometimes think you're speaking in full sentences, but you're
Mm-hmm.
not. So it sounds crazy, but we're actively working on it. And we stop each other and say, useful sentences.
Yeah.
Useful
Yeah.
sentences.
That's
So,
real. I think for me, the three biggest, so you already said the thing about like, when there's a moment like, okay, what story am I telling? And even saying it to your partner so that they could be like, nah, that's not what I meant or whatever. But I think for me, especially when like life starts lifing and I might feel anxiety about something, like, what do I know to be true? Because it's very easy to think like this could happen, and it could. What's happening right now? What do I know to be
mm,
true? Because that kind of like grounds you in the moment. I think the other thing for me, especially from an over functioning standpoint, like that's another one of my things. Like I have this need to be understood, and it's cool when you have someone or when you're talking to someone who like is really like help me understand, like keep going.
mm-hmm,
But sometimes you're in conversations with people who are committed to not understanding.
mm-hmm,
They heard you, they just don't like how that feels, or that causes that cause for them to show up differently,
mm-hmm,
or cause for them to have to change their
mm-hmm,
behavior.
mm-hmm.
And so you will know the difference. Like if you know, to your point, I'm speaking in full sentences, I've given the full examples, I've said what that looks like for me is
mm-hmm.
like if you're being very clear in your explanation of whatever it is you're talking about, and that person is like just being very
Right.
whatever, it's like stopping and being like, this person is committed to not understanding, and I don't, and like politely in the conversation, but just like don't overextend. Like there's a difference between not communicating
mm-hmm,
well
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
someone being that. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
like the second, probably more like um recent thing that I've been like working through.
Mm-hmm,
And I think the third I would say is like lead with curiosity. So instead of, to your point, like when people feel incensed or whatever, like when someone says something, instead of reacting or maybe being defensive, maybe say like, well, help me understand, or like,
mm-hmm,
where does that come from, or
mm-hmm,
whatever.
mm-hmm.
And I think it especially, it might help initially maybe in a therapy session so that you can kind of hear it and it's a better environment. But I think, when you, and I'm not speaking just like romantic relationships, but if you're
Right.
having any conversation with someone you're in relationship with,
Mm-hmm,
I think that helps because that person feels like you care
mm-hmm.
and you're trying to, get there. So like leading with curiosity instead of just like, oh, I think this.
Yeah.
Those are
I
the
think that
things.
also helps the person that's asking the question realize that they can think it in a different way. Like you can receive the information um, and hear that different interpretation and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I can see that side.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to get an understanding is really important. Techniques. If a person is dealing, like you realize, like you say, you felt like you were having some anxiousness. One, how did that feel? What did
Mm-hmm.
you like? What made you realize, okay, this might be a little bit of depression, or this is not normal, or this might be a little bit of anxiety? And then
Mm-hmm.
like some tips that you may have gotten out of therapy to help with anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
if
Yes.
that's what they said it was.
Yeah, so for me, like, and I think there's different levels. Like, I
Yeah.
think you have to be very honest. And talking to your provider, you also will get that feedback of knowing, like, is this something that's manageable through like lifestyle things, or maybe do I need to consider? And there's nothing wrong or shameful about if you need to consider
Mhm.
medication. That's what it's for. So I think some of those aspects, like, if it is starting to impact your ability to function day to day, that's a more serious conversation and maybe something to look into in terms of like, okay, do I need some help regulating
Mhm.
this? I
Mhm.
think, so things like that. I know, some people unfortunately with anxiety deal with like, having to learn like breathing and the
Mhm.
panic attacks and all the things, or depression if you're not able to get out of the bed day to day, things like that. It's impacting your daily life. So I think for me, the first big tool, that's why I shared, I've probably said it a few times throughout our episodes, is like that, what do I know to be true, because it makes you pause.
Mm.
And I think that sometimes with anxiety, your thoughts are racing. They're pinging to this, to this, to this. And it's like, okay, let's sit still. And I remember, I don't, what was that show called? Inside Out.
Mhm.
The movie where the guy, he's like, that was one time that was my homework to actually watch, because one of the characters was anxiety.
Mhm.
And it's like anxiety thinks that it's helping you. It's trying to protect
It's
you in a
trying to
way, but it's
protect
just
you.
like,
Yeah.
no. And so I won't ruin the movie, but you see by the end, it's like it's a lot going on.
Right.
Anxiety cannot, it's out of whack. And so I think that question causes me to pause. I think, even talking through them and naming them sometimes, because sometimes even thinking like, okay, you have this anxious thought, well, let's run this into the ground, or let's run this into the
Worst case scenario.
worst case scenario. And even if you do, like, you let yourself do it, like, that worst case scenario usually is like, you're actually gonna be okay. It's fine. So I think like those things have helped. Like I said, talking to that provider, because they're skilled to understand like how we can navigate this, or what we need to do to make sure that you're well, I think would
Mhm.
be the biggest thing. But yeah, definitely asking those questions, doing the grounding, noticing where you feel stuff in your body, because your body kind of will let you know different things
Mhm.
that are going on. So that would be, yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's I think two of the biggest techniques that I use, because I do have panic attacks, um, is grounding and breathing. And it was funny because in school now, they do yoga for the kids, and they're
Mm-hmm.
realizing how much of the mental health is important. So, my son came up the other day. I was working. He's like, "Mom, you're still working?" It's like, "Yeah, it was a little late." And he's like, "Let's do some breathing techniques."
That's cute.
It was so sweet. And he
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Let's do square breathing." I was like, "What is square breathing?" He was like, "In for four, out for one." And we just did it.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, let's hold hands and do it. But
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really cool, because
Yeah.
breathing really, like, you don't realize how improperly you usually are breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you take the time to actually just take those deep breaths, like, it really does calm your mind and almost clears your mind at
Yeah.
times. So breathing would be one, and grounding um, is huge for me. I often, my husband as well. I haven't seen my son do it, but he may do it, and I just don't realize he's doing it. But just going outside barefoot and standing on literally grounding to the earth,
Mm-hmm.
grounding to the soil, and then I think there was, it's, I don't know if it's the exact, if it's like, I know you do your sights. Like, what do you see?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you hearing? What can you smell? Like in the process of grounding. And I think it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And by the time you come to one, it's kind of relaxing because you're taking your mind off what's spiraling in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You're grounding and you're looking around. 5 things that I see,
Mm-hmm.
4 things that I can hear, and you're thinking about something else. And it works really well for me. I don't know, it's a tool,
Mm-hmm.
so it's something that you can try, but it does work really, really well for me.
Yeah, so we'll make sure we put those some of those techniques in the comments for you all to try and link to them. But yeah, we hope this was helpful for you all to hear us, hear the things
Mm-hmm.
that we go through, that we still are processing and
Mm-hmm.
going through, and definitely, take care of yourselves. Follow us on the things. We're on Facebook and Instagram, Divas and Ducats. Our email is divaadvice@gmail.com, DIVAADVICE at
Diva advice.
gmail.com. And so, yeah, make sure you're following us, liking, and subscribing. And until next time,
Have a great
all
attitude.
right, bye.